So Trump thought he had Canada cornered. Tariff threats, CUSMA hanging over our heads, the 51st state talks. He figured that Ottawa would fold, same way everyone folds.
Yeah, except Canada didn't fold. Canada gave him a deadline, 28 days. Put up or shut up. And now he's the one who doesn't have an answer.
And that is where this story gets dangerous. For him.
So here's what actually happened, because it moved fast and most people missed it. Trade Minister Dominic LeBlanc flew to Washington last week, walked into a meeting with Jamieson Greer, Trump's trade guy, and hand-delivered a letter.
Formal notice here. Canada wants CUSMA renewed. 16 more years now. This wasn't a request for talks. This wasn't a let's sit down and figure things out. This was the clock is ticking. You have until July 1st.
28 days. And here's the thing about deadlines. They only work as leverage if you're the one setting them. And Canada just flipped the table.
Yeah, for months, Trump has been the one making the threats. Tariff threats here, tariffs there. Canada takes advantage of us. The 51st state garbage. He was treating CUSMA like a weapon, something he could hold over Ottawa to extract more.
And LeBlanc's letter essentially said, okay, you want to use CUSMA as leverage? Fine, we'll call your bluff. Renew it or explain it to 38 million Canadians and every American worker in cross-border supply chains why you let it collapse.
Now, think about that for a second. Trump campaigned on being a deal maker, the guy who gets better deals than anybody else. And now Canada is standing there in public saying, okay, make the deal. And guess what? He has it.
He can't, because if he renews CUSMA, he loses his bargaining chip against Canada. Those threats become empty. And if he doesn't, he's the guy who killed the North American trade 4 months before a midterm.
That's not a negotiation. You know what that is? That's a trap. And Canada just walked him right into it.
Now, what happened next gives you an idea of what the U.S. position really is. Greer's response to LeBlanc was essentially, tariffs are the new reality. Get used to it.
Yeah, right. That's not a negotiating position, buddy. That's someone who got caught without a plan. Look, now I want to be clear about what just happened. The United States Trade Representative just told Canada's Trade Minister that tariffs will continue even under a trade agreement. Your own deal. The one that Trump actually signed. The one he called the best trade deal he ever made. Remember that?
And you're telling us that the tariffs are going to stay anyway? Well, apparently that's their position. And here's why. They're panicking. The Wall Street Journal reported this week that Trump's team has been pushing for a 50% American-made requirement on auto parts. 50%. Right now, CUSMA requires 75% North American content. Not American, North American.
So, they want to rewrite the recipe so half of every car has to be US made. And the problem with that is that the auto industry can't do it in 28 days. Heck, they can't even do it in 28 weeks. The supply chain doesn't work that way. Engines cross the border 6 times before they end up in a finished vehicle. You can't just snap your fingers and say, make it in Michigan.
No. So Trump's team is pushing for something impossible on a deadline they didn't set against the country that just called their bluff in public. And the auto sector is watching. Michigan, Ohio, the places Trump promised to protect. If CUSMA collapses, the parts stop moving. The plants go quiet. Tariffs hit U.S. companies harder than anyone because Canada is their biggest customer.
Yeah, 38 million Canadians buy more American goods than 1.4 billion Chinese. Think about that for a second. Canada buys more U.S. exports than China. We're their #1 market, and they're threatening a trade war with their best customer?
You ever walk into a store, insult the owner, demand a discount, and then act surprised when they hand you a bill and a deadline? Of course not. But that's where we are.
Yep. So, what did Mark Carney do? And this is the part that I think is genuinely clever. He didn't shout. He didn't threaten. He didn't give some fiery speech about sovereignty at a rally. He just sent LeBlanc with a letter and a calendar.
He always has the right moves. And that letter did three things at once.
Yep. One, it forced Trump to make a decision. Not posture, not tweet, decide. In public, under a deadline.
Two, it exposed the contradiction in Trump's whole trade strategy. Pick one, dude.
And three, and this is the big one, it started a clock that Washington can't stop. July 1st is coming whether they can answer or not. And every day between now and then, Canada looks like the sane person in these negotiations. The country that wants a deal. The country operating in good faith.
And the U.S., they look like they're stalling because they don't have a coherent position. And remember, the markets notice that. Investors notice that. Auto companies making billion-dollar plant decisions notice that. If North American trade looks unstable, investment goes elsewhere. Luckily, Canada is already in talks with the EU, with Japan, with ASEAN countries. We're ready for this.
Yep. Prime Minister Carney has been very public about diversification. Not as a threat, but as a reality. We trade with the U.S. because it makes sense. But if it stops making sense, well, he doesn't even need to finish that sentence.
So, let's talk about this for a second. July 1st comes, and what are Trump's options?
Well, he's got a few. One, renew CUSMA, which means the tariff threats were always a bluff and everyone knows it. Trump loses face, but trade continues.
Okay, another option is we could let it expire. Trade reverts to WTO rules. Tariffs snap back on everything. U.S. farmers lose the Canadian market. U.S. auto plants lose Canadian parts. Prices spike on both sides of the border, and Trump owns all of it 4 months before a midterm.
And option three, ask for an extension. Buy time, which is probably what they're going to try and do. But Canada, they had to agree to the extension. And after Greer told the bloc, get used to tariffs, the goodwill isn't actually overflowing there.
Now, there is a fourth option that nobody's talking about. Canada walks. Not from CUSMA, but from the assumption that the U.S. is the only game in town. We accelerate the EU trade deal. We build the East-West infrastructure we've been talking about for 50 years. And we stop shipping raw logs to American mills and process them here. We stop exporting bitumen and refine it ourselves.
Now, that's the long game, and Carney has been hinting at it for months. The crisis is not CUSMA expiring. The crisis is that we built an entire economy assuming American goodwill was permanent. And it wasn't. It just isn't.
No, and here's where we're landing on all this. Trump's trade war was supposed to make Canada beg. Instead, Canada set a deadline, exposed the contradiction in U.S. trade policy, and started building its exits.
Yep. 28 days. That's what's left. And the most powerful country on earth doesn't even have an answer. So, we want to hear from you. What do you think happens on July 1st? Does Trump fold and renew CUSMA, or does he blow up and own the consequences?
Drop your thoughts in the comments below and let us know what you think, because we're genuinely curious and we can't wait to see how this pans out.
And if you enjoyed this video, give it a like, give it a hype, and share it so it reaches more and more people.
And check out the links in the description below because there's some fun stuff in there.
Yes.
And we shall see you tomorrow.
Thanks for watching. Ciao for now.